Hey, how's it going there, Turnaround community? I've got a little bit to discuss if you've got a little bit of time. I'd like to take a look at the question of schedule. I don't think in the 40 years I've been involved in this kind of work that anything has changed as much as this particular topic. I mean, let's be fair, the type of computer horsepower you need to run these modern scheduling tools, it just didn't exist in the past. So we certainly weren't doing this in the 80s and the 90s. And weren't doing it very well in the 2000s. But it is a critical piece of execution excellence to be using modern scheduling techniques. And I want to put that out there because I don't know how much people realize that execution excellence is a moving target. Each time there's an improvement in what we can do, then excellence only becomes how we exploit that. And if we're not exploiting the new tools, then we're no longer on that path. So, what is a schedule? Well, a plan or procedure usually written and proposed objective, yada, yada, yada. I did not know until I started building this presentation that a qualification for writing dictionaries was to be a politician. There's nothing wrong in this statement, just doesn't really tell me anything. Facility turnaround shutdown events, to be on the path of excellence, they need everything to be fully, completely scheduled. But let's stop and talk about to be on the path of excellence. Do you want to be? Does your client want to be? Because I got to tell you, this is a true story. I'm not going to name any names, but people that were working for the same company as me during the same period will recognize this right away. I spent a good decade of my life working for a company that repeatedly told us that we are a middle-of-the-road company. We're only going to do everything to meet the middle of the road. We're only going to do middle-of-the-road maintenance. We're only going to pay middle of the road. We're only going to issue middle-of-the-road benefits. It was quite an extraordinary thing. There's no secret to any of this. It was like literally pushed down our throats on a regular basis. It was very important to the leadership team for us to realize that. They seemed very proud of it. I can remember thinking to myself that if you do everything as a leader middle of the road, then I'll do everything as an employer equally middle of the road, employee equally middle of the road. Anyway, that's a little bit of a rabbit hole story there. The point being, not every client is interested in execution excellence. You as a turnaround manager or turnaround team, you need to know that, because if you try to bring some of the stuff I talk about to a client that isn't interested, it's not going to do your relationships much good. So the first thing that when we talk about a fully scheduled turnaround, that schedule needs to be a dynamic schedule. So a static schedule that you build at the beginning and you present out to everybody, you know, we used to see these back in the 80s and 90s, 40 feet of wall space, and people come in with crayons and color on them, and that's not what we're talking about. That was probably execution excellence at one time, but that is absolutely not execution excellence in 2020. The schedule, once it's in play, is a management tool, and it needs to be kept completely up to date. Like a minimum updating is twice a day during execution, and at least once every 24 hours during pre-work as well. If it's a really, really big project, you might very well be going 24 hours a day, even during your pre-work. If you're working 24 hours a day, your schedule has to be updated twice a day. Just that simple. I'm going to repeat this, probably again, fully supported by the leadership team. I see this all the time. I've worked turnarounds where, you know, we had a master scheduler and we had detailed job plans and huge amounts of effort and money were put into the schedule, and then we get to execution date. It's not issued to anybody, and there's no rule about following it, and the scheduler can't get updates from the workforce because the leadership team is not meeting their accountability and holding people to compliance to what they decided to do. So I've seen that. I've seen it over and over again. Something that you want to try to avoid. It takes you off the path. So, what's this? This is not a schedule. I'm just going to say that outright. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. What this is a complete abuse of an extremely powerful spreadsheeting tool. And I'm not going to pretend I haven't worked from schedules like this. You know, I think we all have. They're hugely time-consuming to build, and they're not really very useful after the first 15 minutes of your execution starts because they are static. They are static, and they don't really do anything but show you a picture. And, you know, back in the days, we used to like to plaster them all down the wall of the turnaround trailer and, you know, color them with pens and do all kinds of goofy stuff. No, what I'm talking about when I'm talking about schedule is something like this. And I need people to understand that this is just, you know, the teeniest tip of the iceberg. So even just from this one little snapshot, you can see that we're talking about a schedule that has every detail of every individual job. And it's telling me when each of those jobs start. And it tells me when each of those jobs is going to finish. And it shows us which jobs have to be connected to which jobs in order for things to move forward and progress smoothly. Behind the scenes, these modern tools do a great deal more than that. And I'm telling you, as a turnaround manager, this is the core of my cost control program. And, you know, perhaps at some future date we can talk about how that's done. But I think by the time people learn to fully utilize this tool, they've also realized what a powerful cost control tool that they've engaged themselves in. So, requirements for fully dynamic project scheduling. So these are just the high level, what a turnaround manager needs to understand and what a turnaround manager needs to help his client understand. If we really want detailed answers, then, you know, we're going to turn to somebody else in the community of practice and somebody else maybe on the NAVEX team, and we're going to get a more detailed answer. But for now, this is all we need. I feel schedule should roll out of your long-range plan. I don't have enough to say that this is a must, but it is certainly a very nice to have. If you build your long-range plan and manage it through your P6, then you can start building your schedules for individual executions at the very moment that they come into your 10-year plan. It's just a really powerful way of keeping things going, keeping people thinking about things well in advance. All work needs to be fully planned in detail, and this includes all the pre-work. Let's talk about detail. This is where your work management planners, if you use them, this isn't what they do. This isn't a line on a work order that says repair number 6 pump, and then, you know, a bunch of sourcing and materials gathering. And that's not what type of plans you need to run a scheduled turnaround. You need plans that cover every single detail of the job, and that's a different kind of planner, you know. And you know, I'm not the planner myself, but I certainly know where to get them, and I can certainly tell in a very short interview whether I'm talking to a maintenance planner or an actual turnaround project planner. Doesn't mean that one can't learn the skills of the other. It just means that you need to know when you're staffing up who you've got on your team. There can only be one plan. I feel like I'm reciting from that old TV show, The Highlander, but there can really only be one plan. There can only be one schedule. And I'm sure everybody sitting there is like, oh, duh. But this is something that is fought about on every turnaround site that I've ever been on, right? Usually starts because the client, for whatever reasons of their own, wants to have multiple execution teams. And the multiple execution teams want to, you know, they want to do their own thing. It's a leadership function to integrate teams, to decide that's how it's going to be. You can't have 6 different execution teams running 6 different schedules and 6 different GCs. I shouldn't need to talk a long time about that. Although we all see it happening on an almost every event basis, it's pretty obvious that it shouldn't be. And it's only a political matter to get rid of it. Which brings us back to fully supported by the leadership team, particularly regarding compliance. So if the leadership team has said that the turnaround management team is managing the turnaround, then everything has to filter through that team. And the reason it has to filter through that team is because this work has to be done in this modern age to a detailed, dynamic schedule. If all the work doesn't come across my desk, then all the work doesn't go through my planners, and all the work doesn't go into the schedule, then we're just heading back to the goat rodeo. And, don't get me wrong, I made a lot of money off goat rodeos for many, many years, so I'm not really totally against it. I just recognize that it doesn't lead to excellence. Major maintenance events in brownfield processing facilities, that's what we're talking about. That's the correct terminologies. This differentiates quite a lot from greenfield. In particular, how schedules are developed and how we are going to intend to use the schedule. So that's why it's an important qualification. It's also important to understand that you could have a very successful project management team that doesn't come from these types of brownfield environments, and they're probably not going to do very well when they come into our world. There's just too many variables that aren't a part of a greenfield project where you have control over everything. Don't forget, the operators are the ones who are actually in charge. So you as the turnaround management team can't control that environment. Successful turnaround management teams and the processes they utilize place demands on every aspect of the business. This is true. You hear people in finance complaining about it. You'll hear people in payroll complaining about it. You hear your leaders complaining about it. You hear your managers and supervisors complaining about it. It's true. We do. We place a lot of demands through our process. And the least understood demands that we place, and the ones that cause the most amount of grief for us as teams, have to do with deadlines. In order to meet all the criteria that I just talked about, you need to have time to do it. So, why would I be asking for an IFC package more than a year prior to kickoff? I can understand that maybe the engineering providers and they don't really see why I would need that. Well, that job might be very complex. That job might involve some very long lead materials. My planners need that job now in order for them to be giving it to the scheduler in a few months to get it built into the schedule. If this is going to be a significant part of our outage, some of these end up being your critical path jobs. I need those critical path jobs planned and scheduled to the last second. We have the capabilities. We only need to buckle down and do it. And the biggest thing that stands in our way of success is just compliance to timelines. If your turnaround team is giving you a deadline of September 23rd, be a sport. Give them what they're asking for on September 22nd. Why do we need to plan every job in such detail? I think I covered it earlier. The answer is simple: scheduling. You can't have a detailed schedule if you didn't have detailed job plans. You just can't. Why are we determined to plan and schedule every detail of a 200,000 person man-hour outage? Because we can? No. Not because we can. Because we're trying to annoy people? No. Because we like to put a lot of demands on people that have other things to do? No. None of those things. We do it for one reason only: the quest for execution excellence. That's what it's all about. Schedule is a big thing, way too big to cover in a short LinkedIn video like this. But the bigger understanding of scheduling will help all turnaround teams everywhere. It's It's not well understood by groups who are not using the tool. And ultimately, if it's not well understood, it's also not well supported. If your engineering providers aren't getting you your packages until a month before your outage starts, then those packages aren't in the plan, and they're not on the schedule. And there's nowhere to go but down from there. Execution excellence is a long, difficult road when it comes to brownfield project management. And there is no single answers to anything. And that's why tools like modern scheduling tools like P6 are such a blessing to a turnaround management team. Because we are managing so many details at such high level of complexity that we need a tool that can keep a line of sight on all of those things. The tool can't do that by itself. It's the sad realization I think we've all had as we've entered this computer tool world. The tools don't feed themselves, they don't load themselves, they don't, it doesn't matter how much you pay for your P6, it's not going to build your schedule by itself. You got to have a team that does that, and you got to have the time to do it, and you got to have a leadership team that's interested in supporting these types of initiatives and getting to a path that leads to a higher level of excellence. Do you ever achieve execution excellence? It's a moving target. It's hard to catch up to moving targets. Is it worth pursuing? Absolutely. Like, why would you pursue anything else? Why, as a project managing team, would you have interest in anything other than execution excellence? So we at the NavX team, we recognize that our scheduler is really the enabling agent that lets the rest of us look good. Have a nice day, and thank you for your time.